welcome back for another Diving In with Devin podcast. So, I wanted to talk about Moesha, but I didn't know how, and I didn't know what points to hit on, but then it all hit me at once. Because it started with me just defending Moesha, because I feel like there are a lot of videos out there that talk about how annoying Moesha is, how bad of a friend she is, and basically how she was a terrible character. And one of the beginning videos I've ever made on this channel talked about how characters from the 90s and 2000s are mostly hated. And I talked about, Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City, and how back in the day people really loved Carrie. They loved her fashion. They were rooting for her with certain characters. But as times have turned, people look at Carrie differently. Same with Ted Mosby. People loved Ted when How I Met Your Mother first came out. They were rooting for him to be with Robin. There was all this we love Ted. But again, now with new lenses, I don't know what lenses those are, now people just hate Ted and think he's creepy. Honorable mention, Ross Geller from Friends. Everyone loved Ross and Rachel back then. Now everyone's Ross is horrible. And I also mentioned Joan Clayton from Girlfriends. And this kind of leads back to Moesha. The biggest reason why people don't like Joan is because a lot of people said she was annoying and was a bad friend, and that she wasn't a good friend of Tony. And there were a lot of discussions on the relationships between the girlfriends in the show Girlfriends that I probably will touch on later. But the biggest thing that I saw is that everyone always thought Joan thought she was better than everyone. And it made me think, Moesha is kind of the same. And follow me. So Moesha is a TV show that came out in the 90s, for some background. And Moesha was a teenage girl, and I can't remember how long it has been since her mom died, but her mom is dead. She has a younger brother, a father, and a stepmom who is the principal of her school, Dee. Her father's name Frank, and her brother's name is Miles. And throughout, I think, 5 seasons, let's see how long Moesha was on air. Hello? Can someone tell me? Give me 1 second. 6 seasons, 127 episodes. Okay, Moesha, period. So Moesha was on for 6 seasons, and from those 6 seasons, we basically watched Moesha from 15 to 19, I want to say. Maybe she did hit 21, because when I looked at Niecy's age, it was 15 to 19, but the show lasted for 6 seasons, so I'm confused on how they did the years. But regardless, Moesha had a group of friends. She had Hakeem, Niecy, and Kim. Those were her base friends. Her biggest boyfriend was Q, and then throughout the series, she had one-off boyfriends throughout the time, and then eventually dated Hakeem. Watch my Friends to Lovers video to see how I feel about that. But one thing I've noticed throughout the time of social media is how people discuss Moesha now, and how she is not portrayed in the most positive light, and people do not care for her character. They say that she's selfish. I literally went to Reddit. I was why do people not like Moesha? And a lot of people are just she's whiny, she complains, she's a bad friend, she's always in people's business. And I'm thinking to myself, is that really different than any of us? Because are we always in people's business? We literally have social media. And unless you don't have social media, that makes sense. But everyone does a Neve and Max catfish, where you guys are private investigators and y'all can find out information about people. Doesn't that make you nosy? Isn't it nosy when you notice that someone has deleted a certain profile picture, and then you go to the other person's profile picture to see if that picture's not there? Isn't that nosy? So what makes Moesha different? Because at least Moesha had the excuse of being a teen. Some of y'all are in your 20s and 30s doing this. So what's really clocking? Yeah, we're going to get into it, because I'm going to defend Moesha, because the biggest problem about Moesha is her father. And I'm going to get into the whole elitism and why I think that fits into Moesha's biggest problem that people have with her. So elitism is A person who believes that a select group of individuals, often based on wealth, intellect, talent, or social status, is superior and should have more power or influence. I believe throughout the whole show of Moesha, she always saw herself as being better than others, which is why she was always in people's business, because she always wanted to fix people's situations, which inherently is not bad because she wants to fix them. She wants people to have better lives, but it always ruins people's lives, what she doesn't see. But again, she's a teenage girl. Where I think she gets the elitism from is from her father, Frank. Now, the reason why I say this is because I can relate to Moesha. And I think in the 90s, a lot of people could relate to Moesha. But nowadays, people relate more to Hakeem, Kim, and Niecy. So when they see people like Moesha or Carrie or Joan, they're like, oh, so you think you're better than me. You think you blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's why we don't like you. Because Frank, sorry, I'll take a pause. So Frank was a car salesman, which in the 90s was like a really good job. And if you saw by Moesha's house, it was very wealthy, and it was a 2-parent household. So even though Moesha's mother had passed, once Moesha's mother had passed, Frank married a new woman, Dee, who was a vice principal or principal at Moesha's high school. So 2 parents in the household working really good jobs. That already puts people at elite stature, because when I was growing up, I grew up being like the only black person in like the neighborhood, in like the suburbs. And my father worked for a car company, which is ironic, but my mother was a nurse. So we had like a lot of money, and we were like upper middle class. And I was very used to that experience, but I was also very used to my father putting this notion in my head that like we were better off than most people. And maybe he didn't mean that to come off as elitism, but then I start to look at myself like, oh, like I have more than others, and like how should I feel about that, or etc. And for Moesha, she saw that she had more than others and always wanted to help people out. What's coming to my head is that episode where Moesha thought like Hakeem had a date because he had all these candles lit, but it was because his light bill was turned off. So then she ends up like trying to help him out, but he's like, Moesha, I don't need your help. And like Moesha was coming from like a good place, because that wasn't something that came to her mind because her lights had never been turned off. That's not something she ever had to experience. She always saw her friends struggle, so whenever her friends did things that she knew would help them, she would always be in their business, which again wasn't her trying to be rude, but it's just like, boy, you already know your lights be turned off. Why you spend money on this date with this girl? Like, maybe you should spend your money. And they may be like, oh, we should get out of my business. You don't know, but it's still like, well, as your friend, I see you don't have no money, so I'm trying to help you out. And again, that may not be like specifically what happened, but like in that episode, like I don't think Hakeem like had a date or anything, but like we all know a friend that like has helped you out. For instance, like let's say a friend lends you money and they're like well off, but they notice after they lended you money, all of a sudden you buying like good food or going out or whatever, and they're like, that's crazy because you were broke, asked me for money, or I see that you needed help, gave you some money, and then now you out just living luxuriously when you should be like, you know, keeping that money with like safe with you, so you're not like spending it crazy, so you can like the word is on the tip of my tongue, y'all, ration out your money so you can make it to like the next check or whatever. And I think Moesha had that same thing. That's why she was always in people's business, because she's like, y'all keep coming to my house. And that's something that no one ever points out. Yes, Moesha was always in people's business, but also people make their business Moesha's business, if that makes sense. Because why y'all always around Moesha if she's such a horrible person? And I'll be honest, it's because y'all don't, and by y'all I mean her friends, y'all don't have stability. Like I'm literally on the website looking for Niecy's parents. Like I'm looking like, who played Niecy's parents? I can't find Niecy's parents, because I knew that Kim was raised by Nikki Parker. Again, the Parkers had spin off, but she had a single mother. And then Hakeem had a single mother as well, who I think was played by the actress who played Harriet in Family Matters. So in my head, I'm like, okay, let's assume Niecy, even if Niecy had two parents, all your friends don't have the same lifestyle as you. And you see that they struggle a lot. All you want to do is make sure that your friends have the same opportunities as you, etc. Now, the only time that I would be like, okay, Moesha, you kind of crazy for that, or like when she stepped out of bounds, is in regards to that cheerleading episode where her and Kim auditioned to be cheerleaders, and Kim got it and Moesha didn't, because that's her elitism. Oh, I'm skinny, I ain't supposed to be a cheerleader, not Kim, because she's plus sized. Like, let's not forget that. That's that elitism where she's just like, you're plus size and poor. That doesn't scream cheerleader. Now, did Moesha ever say that? No, but she did call Kim big in that cheer, and that was wild. That was the one time I'm like, yeah, Moesha, I can't defend you. But a lot of, like, Moesha's behavior literally comes from her father. Like, I'm looking at the definition of, like, elitism, snobbish. That's what Moesha was. Arrogant. That's what Moesha was. Thinking that others were inferior to her. Moesha always thought that if there was like a new character that she didn't mess with, especially if they were like a woman, Moesha would be like, I'm definitely better than them. Like, she always had that mentality that she was like definitely better than them, and that like she could like fix everything. And that literally comes from Frank, because there would be times that Frank would turn on her because Moesha was literally just a teen, but she always had common sense. Like, when she didn't sleep with Jeremy and they were at that slumber party and she comes downstairs and her father yagas her, like yanks her out. And it's just like, you can't trust me as your daughter. Also, when Q was at her house, literally they went up, they literally got caught kissing, but nothing happened. Like, no, he wasn't supposed to be in her room, but I trust Moesha enough that even if her father indeed did not come upstairs, she would not have slept with him. And it's like, but her father has this elitism where he's like, my daughter's pure, my daughter's this, she's not supposed to be hanging around with no hood rat. Like, Frank had this elitism that was poured into Moesha, and therefore now everyone hates Moesha. But it's like, Moesha never had any ill will towards her friends. Also, I'll say it, I do think Moesha was better than her friends, because from memory, all I remember is Niecy, Hakeem, and Kim being goof-offs. And a lot of the memory I have of Kim is mainly from the Parkers, where I think she was dumber there, but still, like, it made sense on why her, Stevie, and T hung out. Because even though Stevie was, like, smart, like, book smart, and, like, got her stuff together, she still was dumb in the sense of, like, the things she would do. So it made sense why Stevie T and Kim hung out. But when it came to Moesha, Hakeem, Kim and Niecy, they literally grew up together. That's the only reason why they're still friends, because it doesn't make sense why someone like Moesha would be hanging out with them, because she has this elitism complex and they don't. And they didn't grow up the same as Moesha, so why else would they wouldn't have that complex either. And even though Hakeem comes over to their house every day to eat breakfast, that's like one inkling of he don't have the same home life. Because just like Frank says, Hakeem, why you always at my house eating my food? And even though he says that mean, he always allows Hakeem to be at his house eating his food, because he's like, this boy clearly needs a meal and some breakfast. But again, that's him still having that elitism where he's like, look at me helping the children out. Like, I can't stand Frank. And the only reason I say that is because I low-key think, like, my dad be thinking that, like, sometimes he be helping me and my friends out, but it's him, like, patting himself on the back, like, look at me being this elite man and I'm helping these children out. And it's like, sir, sometimes you can just be kind and just, like, help people out. And the only reason why I think that Moesha should have never been friends with Niecy, Hakeem, and Kim past a certain age, like, a lot of people are like, oh, she just wasn't a good friend. I just don't think they should have been friends. They didn't, that's what I mean. They didn't have the same mentality. And I'm not saying that, like, Hakeem, Niecy, and Kim had to be elitist, but it's also like y'all come from different backgrounds. Kim and Hakeem specifically grew up with single mothers, and sometimes the bills being turned off. And from the Parker spinoff, Nikki didn't even get her degree, was getting her degree the same time her daughter was, and her daughter was 18. So again, it's just like, and then Hakeem's mother was never home, because I think Moesha, if I'm remembering correctly about one of these episodes, Moesha like snapped on Hakeem's mom like, Hakeem doesn't have this or this or this, and Hakeem's mom's basically like, honey, I work. Like, I know your parents work, but they have different circumstances than me where they're able to get off at 5 o'clock. I have to work multiple jobs to provide for me and my son. And it's like episodes like that lets me know, like, Moesha never... And it's crazy, too, because, like, you've been friends with these people since they were little. So why hasn't the influence of the working class influenced Moesha? Like, I guess that's what really bothers me, because it makes sense of, like, Moesha just became friends with them. But you know them since they were kids. So you know that they've grew up being less, I guess, fortunate than you. So why are you acting brand new? This is the first time their lights been turned off and you've seen it? Like, Hakeem, I mean, okay, it makes sense. Hakeem probably never, like, says, oh, my bills got turned on. My lights kept turned off in 4th grade because he's probably embarrassed. But, like, at the same time, I just, like, I think if Moesha had the Sex and City girls as her friends, or even if she was like, she had a friend like Joan, if like we added in like a Joan character into Moesha, I think Moesha would have been seen as more likable because she would have had a friend at the same stature as her. Whereas because we had Niecy, specifically Niecy and Kim being the women, she always looked down on them because they didn't have what she had. She always looked down at them like, what are y'all doing? Like, basically, this is me speaking as Moesha, like how I see it being written out, not my opinion, but like, y'all already broke and poor and have single parents. Like, what are y'all doing? Like, why y'all acting a fool? Kim, why are you chasing Hakeem? Put your head in the books. Like, and honestly, advice-wise, it's not bad. Especially coming from, like, a 16-year-old Moesha. Like, if you look at your friend and you're like, you're already struggling, why add more struggle? Like, that's common sense for Moesha. That's her common sense, where it's just like, girl, you're already going through this, and this, or you're already struggling with this, or you're already failing this class. Why go out to a party, etc.? Like, why are we, like, doing these things? Because, like, it's just like, I feel like the reason why, I already said this at the beginning, but again, the main reason why people hate on Moesha is because most people are now Kims and Niecy's. And while I'm explaining this, I'm not saying it as an insult. I'm just saying, in 2025, at least when I was in high school, my parents were divorced by then. But most of my friends were in single-parent households, or even if they had fathers, their fathers were not, like, helping. Their fathers were there, but, like, they weren't helping. Because a lot of my friends would complain about that. They would say, like, my dad's in the house, or he just works, he goes to his room, and he don't, like, spend time with us. And so when I was growing up in high school, like, hearing those people's experiences, I would always go back to when my parents were married and how, like, I never experienced nothing like that. Like, my dad is present in my life. Like, when I say he's present, it don't mean like, oh, like, he called me here and there and, like, whatever. I'll see him in holidays. Like, my dad was a present figure in my life, pre-divorce, post-divorce. I saw both my parents, etc. Like I said, I grew up more in, like, the Moesha circumstance. So when I would see my friends do certain actions, I wouldn't get in their business like Moesha, but it just made sense on why they did certain actions they did, talk to certain dudes they did because of the certain circumstances that, like, we're in, we're around, we're revolved around. So it's just like, if I had a friend like Kim and she was chasing after Hakeem, I mean, it makes sense because you don't have anything in the sense of, like, that love or affection like at home, because Nikki was a hard parent. Her father, even though he had money, he was not there. Like, even when we see him in the Parkers, played by Tommy Ford, rest in peace, he loved, in a sense, quote unquote, loved Kim, but he wasn't really a father to Kim. So, like, you see someone like Hakeem, who's been in your life since you were kids, and you see how Hakeem was a good man. Like, he was very kind, and you see someone like that, you would want that. But for some reason, Hakeem never wanted Kim, because Kim was a reminder of what he didn't want. He wanted the Mitchell's lifestyle. He wanted to be with Moesha. He wanted to be frank. He wanted that lifestyle bad. He wanted that elitism, but he didn't have that mindset. He didn't have the cruelty that Moesha did. That arrogance that Moesha had, Hakeem didn't have that. He didn't have it within him. And that's why I think that it just isn't going to work out for them. Like, I know it just ended on a cliffhanger, but that's why I didn't see Hakeem and Moesha being together, because he didn't have that elitism that Moesha had, or that same mindset that she had. And Niecy, I don't even know what to say about Niecy, because should I mention when she kissed Hakeem, or like some of like the gutter stuff she did as a quote unquote friend to Moesha that no one else mentions? They always mention how Moesha was a bad friend. Moesha was just elitist. She just saw herself as being better than her friends. That's why she treated them the way she did. She still loved them, but she just saw herself as being better than them. Just like how Joan saw herself as being better than Lynn, Tony, and Maya. Because Maya was the one with the kids, so Joan thought she was better. Lynn was a hobosexual. She was just from house to house, never had stability. And then Tony was the only one that could kind of compete with Joan, but anytime something bad happened in Tony's life, Joan saw herself as being better. But again, Joan still saw herself as being better than her friends. Moesha sees herself as being better than her friends, which is why a lot of people don't like Moesha, because people probably are friends with someone like Moesha, where they love them, they grew up with them, that's they like soul sister, like Kim, and to this day, Kim, Moesha, and Niecy, and Hakeem, they group, they love each other. But that friend puts themselves in your business. That friend looks down on you or makes sly remarks about the things that you're doing in life. It makes you feel bad about yourself. And I think that's what people mainly don't like about Moesha. But I wish people would like actually express that, rather than like just, I guess people just hate on her without really saying like, the reason I hate on her is because I know someone like her, or because she thinks she's so better. But at the same time, why would she think she's not better? That's the real question. Why would she? Because again, it's just like any of those stories that we watch where someone comes up from humble beginnings, but then they get that star elite status, and then they turn around and be like, I don't know you. Remember when Penny Proud went to Panay, and she had that whole solo career, and she had to be humble real quick, and they were like LPDZ? Do y'all remember the episode, Proud Family? That's Moesha. She is Moesha, okay? She doesn't know a Hakeem, a Niecy, or a Kim. She's elite status. And a lot of people, if they had the same opportunities, the same lifestyle as Moesha, they would act the exact same, which is why in the 90s, no one had an issue with it, because I think in the 90s, like, the economy was booming and bussing, and most people were living in family households and had it pretty good. Even if you had like a single parent, just like Moesha or Kim and Nikki, you still had it pretty good. Rather, in this 2025 economy, you don't want to hear someone like Moesha talk. You don't want to hear what Moesha got to say. You don't want to hear Moesha try to help you with your problems. You want to shut Moesha up. But like I said, if we were in the circumstance of Moesha, we would love her again. Which is why I think a lot of these characters that used to be loved are not loved anymore, because the time has changed and you don't want to hear that certain voice or certain character speak. You don't want to hear a 16-year-old girl from LA living in the suburbs with her 2-parent household and her father, who I think Frank bought Moesha a car for her 16th birthday or 18th birthday. I think he did buy her a car because he works at a car dealership. You don't want to hear that and watch her talk down to someone like him, who people may relate to more now than they did when they were a kid. And it is about relatability. When we were all growing up as kids, we all saw ourselves as main character Moesha, polished, put together, and we looked at Kim, Niecy, and Hakeem like, what are y'all doing? But now, as adults, grown up, we're looking like, Moesha, shut up. Shut up, Moesha, because I'm trying to get my life together as much as possible, but I don't need you butting in. But I would love to hear what y'all have to say in regards to like the Moesha conversation and how you see her as a character, and your thoughts about like what I've been saying about Moesha. If it was like, if it made sense, what I was trying to say about like her having this elite status and that like her being friends with like Hakeem, Niecy, and Kim doesn't make any sense because they just have so much different backgrounds, which is why it always makes me laugh that they like grew up in the school together, because it's like, I don't know, based on like Frank, maybe it's because the mom was alive at the time, based on Frank, I just don't see him putting Moesha in the same school as like these other kids, because he had this big old elitism head. Like, look at Frank's forehead. He had the biggest forehead because it was full of elitism. I will see you all in the next podcast episode or the next video you decide to stop by. Bye.
Why we giving up on what's meant to be? We were two pure hearts since we're 17.